Good morning. Welcome to part 2 of the UCLA Food Allergy webinar series. Today we're going to focus on the elementary school years. I'm Jessica Reid and I'm joined by Kara Horowitz, and we are the chairs of the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee. Like many of you, I'm a parent of a food allergic child. My son was diagnosed with severe allergies to tree nuts, eggs, and seeds when he was a baby. And that baby is now 16. And while he manages his food allergies pretty independently now, elementary school was quite a different story. There were two things that were critical in helping our family navigate the world of food allergies during those, what could be very tough years. First, our allergists at UCLA. They are experts in the field and have always been our primary trusted source for the most up-to-date food allergy information. They also take a holistic approach to patient care. They really get to know their patients and work with the families to come up with management plans that are best for each particular situation. Second, connecting with other folks in the food allergy community has been incredibly important to our family. Having the ear and the support of fellow food allergy parents was very grounding and really helped me feel like I was never alone in the trenches. So when you logged on to this webinar, we posed 2 poll questions that reflect these 2 important factors in managing food allergies. There are the results. Allergists, that's good. A lot of you rely on your allergist to get your food allergy information. And not everyone feels like they have a ton of support. Well, these 2 concerns, information and support, were also the impetus for us creating the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee. And we are a group of parents and UCLA doctors and staff who want to better the lives of families that are impacted by food allergies. And our committee has basically 3 main objectives. The first is to foster personal connections. If your child is a patient at UCLA in the food allergy program, our committee is here to connect with you and support you. And the second is to advocate for the food allergy community within UCLA and outside of it. And the third is to raise funds for research, including clinical trials, and for the expansion of the UCLA food allergy program. I'm so excited for today's conversation about navigating food allergies for children during the elementary school years. We'll hear about the amazing groundbreaking work UCLA is doing on behalf of these children and their families, and we'll address both the medical side of food allergies, as well as how to navigate many of the social and emotional food allergy related challenges that arise at this age. You know what these are: school safety, after school activities, birthday parties, all of that stuff. Now I would like to introduce Kara Horowitz.
Thank you, Jessica. My name is Kara Horowitz, and I'm both a food allergy patient and a food allergy parent. I had an anaphylactic allergy to peanuts since I was a baby. When I was growing up and fewer people understood food allergies, I had several terrifying allergic reactions. As an adult, I was determined to avoid another scary incident. So if I were going to a restaurant, I would call, and if they used peanuts in the kitchen, I didn't feel safe eating there. I also avoided any foods that might contain traces of peanuts or cross-contamination. I spent countless hours doing research and fearing that something could go wrong. When my middle son, Will, who's now 9, was little, he was diagnosed with a peanut and tree nut allergy. My concerns about and fear of food allergies grew exponentially. 6 years ago, we had the good fortune to meet Dr. Kachru at UCLA just as she was starting to desensitize patients via oral immunotherapy, or teaching their bodies to tolerate increasing amounts of the food to which they're allergic. While we're still allergic, Will and I are now able to each tolerate much more of the nuts that were so dangerous for us. Our allergies are infinitely more manageable, and the treatment we receive from Dr. Kachru impacts both of our lives every day. We're so grateful for the care we got at UCLA. As Jessica mentioned, today's discussion focuses on food allergies among 5 to 11-year-olds. Our incredible UCLA experts will answer some of the questions you submitted during registration for today's session. The Q&A function in Zoom is on, so please feel free to write in your questions and we will try to address them today, time permitting, or use them to inform our future programs. We'll also be sharing more information about food allergy clinical care and research at UCLA and the program's strategic vision to ultimately provide better futures for our children. I would now like to welcome our UCLA expert faculty in this field to join Jessica and me on screen. I'm honored to turn it over to Dr. Rita Kachru.
Hi, my name is Rita Kachru. Thank you so much, Jessica and Kara, for setting up this food allergy meeting and for this webinar. And I can say from all the doctors, we're very excited. So I'm Rita Kachru. I'm an internist, pediatrician, and allergist, and my focus is food allergies, management, prevention, whatever we can do to make it a safer world. Maria?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. You'll see walking behind me a mom that wanted to, that's here in our CTRC and wanted to actually want. We have a patient down we cannot share. My name is Maria Garcia-Lloret. I'm an allergist, a pediatric allergist in the Department of Pediatrics at UCLA, and the co-founder and co-director of the UCLA Food Allergy Program, has been running for more than 15 years. I'm very glad to share with all of you what has been our, combined expertise in treating children with food allergies. And now I pass it on Dr. Manish Butte.
Hi, everyone. I'm Manish Butte. I'm an immunologist here at UCLA, and I'm the division chief for pediatric allergy and immunology. And I have been taking care of kids with immune deficiencies and food allergies for about 10, 15 years now. And I'm super excited to join this group and get started with people's questions.
Thank you, Drs. Butte, Kachru, and Garcia-Lloret for joining us today. Before we dive into the questions that were pre-submitted by our registrants, we do want to remind our audience that the faculty cannot answer specific medical questions, but can discuss more broad food allergy questions and talk about the direction of food allergy care at UCLA. Additionally, the information shared today is based strictly on the latest research available. If you're like me, you may second guess some of the ways you've handled some food allergy situations in the past, but please keep in mind that food allergy research is always evolving, and we are all just doing the best we can with the information that we have at the time. So no guilt, no feelings of guilt today.
With that said, our first question is for Dr. Kachru. We've received many questions related to keeping food allergic kids safe while they're at school, recognizing that at least in California, there are no mandates or uniform guidelines for how schools deal with food allergies. What can parents do to keep their kids safe when they're at school?
Excellent question, Kara. And I think the most important thing that we can do as parents is to communicate with the school that the child has a food allergy and develop a daily food allergy management plan with the school. So two main goals should come out of that management plan. One, strategies to decrease exposure to the food allergen, both in the classroom as well as outside on the school grounds. So strategies to decrease exposure. And the second goal is to ensure that if there is accidental exposure to a food allergen, that there's going to be appropriate emergency plan in place. So it's really important for parents to feel comfortable in advocating for their child and to communicate with the school for those two main goals to make sure that they're safe in their school environment.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Garcia-Lloret. Can you find traces of food allergens on common school equipment? Do these pose a risk to my very allergic child? And how often do you see food allergic reactions in school settings?
We can start from the beginning. The first answer is yes, you can find. In fact, I have explained before, somebody actually has done research and wiping every tables and in cafeterias and in classrooms. And yes, you can find traces of, all allergens. In fact, for peanut, that is one of the allergens, food allergens that people are more concerned. The amounts, people took the work to measure how much are way below what you 99.9% of patients are reacted to. If we talk about equipment, we're not talking about kids' backpacks. For milk is another matter. The amount of milk that can be identified, especially in cafeterias, is a little bit higher, but still below just by contact with objects what would trigger a reaction. So I think at every level, and each school is different, we have to be aware and talk to the cafeteria, talk to the teacher, talk to the parents, in which hand washing and equipment washing is important. You will never eliminate 100% of the allergen in question, but you would certainly reduce by 99.9% the chances of having a reaction in the school. The third question is do reactions occur in the school? Yes. Although 50% of reactions occur at home, believe it or not, it's we mess up and the child takes, the milk from his brother. One of the second most common places for reactions is at school. And that's why it's so important that the school personnel, the patient, the teacher are all prepared for an emergency plan, because they will happen. I get every single week a call from a patient. Oh, so-and-so, oh, how did you do? Oh, we did okay, they call. So it's gonna happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's also a matter that we will be prepared and things are gonna go reasonably smooth.
Dr. Garcia-Lloret, while some schools are nut-free, or at least very nut allergy aware, keeping children who are severely allergic to other less common allergens like egg, sesame, wheat, you mentioned milk, can be very challenging. What advice do you have for those families?
I think that the principal, the teacher, the cafeteria, everyone should be very well aware of what are the allergies that your child has. Banning all allergens is impossible, because this year we have 8 or 9 in the list. Next year we'll have to add avocado to it, or maybe pumpkin seeds. It's almost impossible, to comply with every possible food allergy. The most common continue to be the most common. I think that it is important that there should be a list of the allergens that are triggers for your child, and that list should be in the cafeteria, should be in the classroom, should be with the school nurse and the school office. I think being deliberate is what helps. And so, well, I don't know. And then, of course, most important is you empower your own child to be deliberate. No, don't take the highest insurance is what your child knows and how is he prepared to be vocal and advocate for himself or herself, because you are not going to be there. You put everything in place, and then the ultimate, at the end of the day, it's him or her that's going to be able to, if he had been exposed, to say what's going on with him. I'm itching, I'm having this, I'm having an allergic reaction. And if somebody offers him food, just push it away. So again, school empowerment and child empowerment is a lot based on what the families arrange and establish early on for their child.
Maria, I'm curious though, how does that work for kids who are developmentally delayed? Like when they can't be
They develop what?
When they're developmentally delayed and they maybe have a hard time.
Oh, that is even a bigger challenge. And we have patients where even we in certain cases even recommend some form of desensitization for those reasons. Now, patients that are in special education, whether it is any allergic or any emergency, has to be dealt even more specifically, where in the classroom at lunchtime, there's got to be a one-on-one, monitoring. And if the school cannot accommodate that, you need to go to a different school. That's my opinion. If the school, hey, we have like one monitor for every 10 kids that are in special ed that perhaps it's harder for them to handle it, then take your kid out of that school. That's my answer. We do the same, with bee stings. If you can't protect your, in the school for bee stings, then move him away from that school and ask the, probably the board or the superintendent, my kid deserves equal attention to others, whatever his disability may be.
Dr. Kachru, what advice do you have for managing the many food-based activities that still happen in schools? Pizza parties, ice cream parties, buttered popcorn, cupcakes with dairy and gluten, all these challenges that come up a lot in school.
Sure. And that goes back to, again, the two main goals that should be discussed when the child is starting the school, actually the beginning of every school year, to really ensure that that child has a food allergy management plan in place. And the big strategy, again, is decreasing exposure. So it would be to request the teacher and the school to limit or minimize any activities related to food. Have the activities have, if there's going to be a prize, maybe instead of a food related prize, have it be a fun activity, watching a movie, doing a dance, something more active and not necessarily food related, because that can also isolate the child. We would also ask the parents to set up a communication with the teacher so that if the teacher or the school is planning on doing a food related activity, that the parent is notified at least 1 or 2 days prior so that they can actually facilitate for their child to have an activity to do during that time, and to make sure that the child also is feeling part of it, of the activity, and not isolated. So again, it's going back to communication and really for the parent to feel very comfortable in asking for that communication, and to know that actually it's their right to ask for that communication, whether it's a private school or a public school, and so that they can decrease exposure and keep their child in a safe environment so that we can prevent accidental exposure and these emergency plans, which also need to be in place for the child as well. So again, it would be requesting limiting exposure to those food-related activities as much as possible.
Thank you. And could you, Dr. Kachru, just touch on what a 504 plan is and when parents should think about that?
So to talk about what Manish had been asking about with a disability, within public schools, like schools that receive federal money, there is something called a 504 plan, which it's available under a federal civils rights law. I think it's like section 504 of the Disability Act of in the 1970s. It was set up, I think, in 1973. But basically, it's listing food allergy as a hidden disability. And so through this 504 plan, it's basically allowing the parent to have a written plan in place, an agreement between the parent and the school of not only decreasing exposure to the food allergen, but also having an emergency plan in place. So do all of our kids who have food allergies have a 504 plan? No. But what I request parents to do is to communicate with the school. And again, going in with those two major goals. How do I keep my kids safe? And how do I prevent emergencies so your staff doesn't have to deal with it, right? So our two main goals are decreasing exposure and emergency plan is appropriate. That they have all the staff is trained in how to use all the emergency medication. Actually, take a step back, that the staff is trained, the teachers, the school aides, the parents who are maybe working as volunteers, the front office, are trained in diagnosis of a food allergy. So what are the symptoms of someone having even a mild symptom? Because a mild symptom, if you can hit it fast enough, is going to prevent a more severe symptom, right? So training of the school staff on how to diagnose a food allergy, how to have access to emergency medications. So making sure and ensuring that the emergency medications are accessible, so the kid is not running across the schoolyard to get access, that they're sitting, they're quiet, they're cool, and someone is coming and giving them their emergency treatment. So training the staff on diagnosis, training the staff or making sure there's access, and then training the staff on administration of the emergency medications. And then also training the staff on how to then contact parents and what the next steps are. So so I ask parents to go to the school and talk to their administrator and say, look, these are the 2 goals that I need for my child to feel safe in this school. One, that you're going to minimize exposure to the food, and what are the steps we're going to take to minimize that exposure? Will I have access to put things up in the school classroom or in the cafeteria? Will I be able to ensure that kids can wash their hands when they're coming back from lunch, that my child is going to have a safe area to eat their lunch? So decreasing is, will I be notified if there's a class party? Will I be notified if there's going to be activities that are related to food? So ensuring decrease in exposure. And then the second step is to ensure that there's access to, that A, everyone is trained, B, there's access to the emergency medications, and then C, that everyone's trained on how to use those medications. And so if a parent, and I always say, go with your gut instinct, if a parent is not feeling that they are getting that communication is not being effective with the school, and they don't feel that the school is giving them, to what Maria was talking about, that the school is not able to give them that written document or even verbal document that we're going to keep your kid as safe as possible, and we are going to have this effective plan in place to decrease exposure, this effective plan in place on what happens if they have accidental exposure, that's when I would think about a 504 plan. And so I do tell parents, go in and say, this is my right. Allergy is considered a hidden disability. These are my rights. And I want to keep my kids safe. And I know you want to keep my kids safe in school. All schools have plans in place to make sure that it's a safe school environment, and this is part of it. And if they don't feel like they're getting that, that's when we talk about a 504. And what the doctor does on that end is they write out what they want from the school, basically to keep that kid safe, what they recommend to make sure that that kid is safe, depending on the age of the kid, whether they think they can carry an epi or not, things like that. Then they give it to the parent, and the parent sets up a meeting between the administrator, the nurse, the teacher. So everybody has this written plan in place. So that's a 504 plan.
Thank you. Related to taking care of children at school, Dr. Garcia-Lloret, should children be allowed to carry their own EpiPen, either in their backpack or in fanny pack? What age would you recommend that a child start doing that?
Yeah, we have, when we practice this question, early on, you had some, what is the ideal age? I think it's more like the ideal kid, is where their level, probably nothing, no kid under probably 9 or should, maybe carry it just in case he loses it or he leaves it in the open air. So probably the older elementary school kid. But the reason why we would have it in his backpack or in his fanny pack is in part, for safety, if he knows how to use it, but more important, when the distance between having a reaction and have access to the epinephrine, is physically too big, So a kid, if you have a classroom that is, 100 a football field away from where the nurse is or where the office is, it makes a lot of sense, even for a 6-year-old, to have it in his backpack with agreement with the teacher that she knows how to use it. The kid knows that he has it, and that the teacher can recognize, I don't know if the word diagnose like Rita was using, but recognize the signs of a food allergic reaction and knows how to use it. I think for self-administration, I would say 8 to 9 and above, and it will depend a lot on the degree of maturity of each individual child. What brings me to the maybe to the concept that there isn't a food allergy typical. Each kid is different. And in the school, people need to understand that the food allergic reactions are going to be different. And you probably know in your own kids. Some kids will have a couple of hives, some kids will will have MSC, some kids will have wheezing. So there are many graduations. And I think that that's another important point when you talk to the school administrators or the CAM counselors. Explain them who your kid is. Is not the kid with a peanut allergy. Is Joe that has this kind of peanut allergy and react this way. And that's is the same, at the time of individualizing which kid should carry the EpiPen in the backpack. That's kind of a long answer, but each kid is different. Not only in the kinds of allergies that they have, but also in the way that they react and in their ability to maybe self-inject. That's my answer.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia-Lloret, for activities outside of school and outside of camp, like drop-off play dates and birthday parties, kind of things that happen once in a while, what precautions should be taken when the parent or regular caregiver is not going to be with the child at that event?
Well, I think, let's say birthday parties, is a good example. I think that, you have, as a parent, you need to do your homework. You need to prep. I think that if a kid is going to attend, aside from where you're prepping your kid on a regular basis every day, they live a food allergy kind of context. But I think it's important that you reach out to the host of, to the responsible adult to make sure that at least reasonable accommodations for your kid are in place. We all know there are mothers and mothers, and some are a little bit loose, and maybe, it's not that he needs to cut those kinds of acquaintances, but perhaps a dialogue to the minimal accommodations that you consider are appropriate for your child. Some kids, you can put them in the middle of chaos and they will not touch one cupcake. And another one, they'll experiment. So it's a mixture of who your kid with a food allergy is and the location that you go. Chaos on chaos is never a good idea. So maybe those are the play dates that you should avoid. But I think that most parents care about their kids as they care about, your own. I think doing your homework, preparing prior to that, it will kind of iron out 95% of the difficulties that the kids might encounter. And more importantly, we have to push for those 95%. Only 5% of dates are not allowed because that gives the kid, a sense of freedom, that he's not isolated, 50% of his dates.
Thank you. Dr. Butte, how likely is it that children will outgrow their food allergies?
The question actually fits in well with Maria's answer just now about play dates, because many of the foods that kids are being exposed to, change as they as they go through these, especially these school age years. And we know that the patterns of food allergy also change throughout these particular childhood years. For example, we know that cow's milk allergy and egg allergy are very common in the early childhood years, but probably about half the kids will outgrow them by the time they are school age kids, by the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Whereas other foods that kids or younger kids may not have as much of an exposure to, like peanuts and tree nuts at play dates, might become more of a risk when your child has a play date in the school age years where they're over some friend's house and might get exposed to these things. And peanuts and tree nuts, as probably everyone knows, are less likely to be outgrown throughout their childhood years. In fact, the minority of children will outgrow food allergies to peanuts or tree nuts. So it looks like for different foods and for different time periods throughout childhood, there are differences in the ability to be outgrown. And I think from an immunological perspective, that's very interesting. Like, what are these windows in time that children are passing through that allow them to gain tolerance to foods where they might not have had tolerance when they were younger? I think there are sort of two windows to keep in mind and that are relevant for these young childhood years. The first is the neonatal window that sort of accompanies the period of breastfeeding to weaning, typically the first 6 months to 1 year. And during that window, there seems to be very special immunological programs set up in the gut, in the processing of foods as they make their way through the gut and then to the immune system, to communicate to those very young infants who are still breastfeeding, to have tolerance, to be tolerant of the antigens that are coming through the breast milk or that the child might be exposed to. And then there's a second window that goes from weaning all the way through early childhood, maybe until age 8 or so, when we see kids outgrowing many of these other foods, like I just mentioned, egg and milk allergies may occur in those young years and then be outgrown by the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old. And there's sort of another window that's sort of formed immunologically during that period, during which time tolerance can be achieved, even if it wasn't available earlier on. And so if you ask, like, what are these windows? What mediates them? How do they work? How can I tell if my kid's going to outgrow this food allergy or not? We don't have all those answers yet, but it does look like there are some specific markers. Like there have been a handful of studies to show that as kids outgrow food allergies, naturally, their food-specific IgEs will go down. There, in many cases, specific skin testing to those food antigens will decrease. Many of these kids also have other less aspects of other atopy, like, for example, less eczema and less asthma does portend that these kids will outgrow it. But that just gives you sort of hallmarks, what actually controls it? How do I control whether my kid outgrows it or not? And for there, you have to sort of lift up the hood and look under the, what's going on inside the immune system. And I think a lot of the recent hints point to the gut microbiome. So the bacteria that live within our guts regulate how foods we take in are processed into nutrition, but also get processed into antigens, also give cues to our immune system to say, this food you should be tolerant to, this food you shouldn't, this food is actually not a food, it's a toxin, it's a bacterial infection, it's something coming after you. So having our immune system learn how to calibrate which antigens are coming down the pipe and to be tolerant to or not seems to be influenced heavily by what other bacteria are living in the gut at that time. What cues, what metabolites they're secreting, and how our immune system can sense those and say, okay, this is just a meal. I don't need to be on alert right now. So with that in mind, that sort of comes almost to the ends of our limits of knowledge, because at this point, we're still in the realm of stamp collecting. We know kind of what bacteria make up the gut microbiome in the kids who've naturally don't have food allergies or who outgrow food allergies versus those who don't outgrow food allergies. We have now senses of bacteria are different. These kids have a different bacteriome inside them than these kids. But we don't really have ways of intervening in that. And if you ask, what are those metabolites that they're making that confer tolerance by the time you're 8 years old, say, versus not? We just have the slightest hints that they're related to fatty acids, that these molecules called fatty acids can reprogram our gut to tolerance. And there may be differences in fatty acid metabolism in those bacteria versus these bacteria, in the kids who become naturally tolerant and outgrow it versus those who don't. The impacts on the immune system then are what result in persistence of IgEs, persistence of food allergy versus outgrowing it. And I would say we don't really have more than that, but I hope that answers your question. Yeah, Kara.
From my personal experience, we were praying that my son would outgrow his allergies, and he had many, many allergies, and that did not happen. So when he was, I would say 8 or 9, maybe, we started thinking about treatment. What is the next thing we can do here in our situation? So Dr. Kachru, what are some of the treatment options that the UCLA food allergy program is offering to food allergic patients, both to keep them safe and to improve the quality of their lives?
So, Jessica, I agree with you. The best case scenario is outgrowing and becoming tolerant. And tolerance meaning that you can eat it at any point in time, you can eat any amount of time, and you'll have no reaction. And, you know, as Manish mentioned, we are feverishly working, and the good news is that there's a lot of funding, a lot of people are more excited about looking at what's causing food allergies, how can we potentially prevent food allergies, how can we manage food allergies, and so we're in a very good space. And from a lot of this research, and we've been lucky to have the opportunity to do it at UCLA, to be a site where we're doing clinical trials in oral immunotherapy, which is a current intervention to help manage food allergies. It's not a cure. And the reason I say it's not a cure, and I think it's really important to decipher, a cure would indicate that there's open tolerance. It doesn't matter how much you eat. It doesn't matter the frequency of what you eat. It doesn't matter the amount, right? Whereas what oral immunotherapy, which is an intervention that we've done clinical trials for, and Maria and I are still doing clinical trials looking at different ways to potentially even improve our oral immunotherapy, which is where we give small increasing doses of what someone's allergic to desensitize them, make them less sensitive to what they're allergic to, so that if they have accidental exposure, it won't be as severe of a reaction. So the caveat with that, though, the reason we call that desensitization and not tolerate or cure is because it's dose dependent and time dependent. And so it requires them to have at least a certain amount over a certain period of time to sustain that desensitization. So we've been really excited in not only being one of the first sites, and actually a site that was crucial in the FDA approval of the first standardized peanut protein, Palforzia. So not only have we had the opportunity to be doing the clinical oral immunotherapy or desensitization, the research in it, we've also been able to now translate that into a clinical OIT program where it's not just on a research basis, and we're able to take our knowledge that we've gotten from the clinical trials to develop this clinical OIT program with an amazing group of nurses and fellows and doctors who are not only desensitizing to peanuts or tree nuts, but also to other foods like egg, milk, for the patients who don't outgrow it, or shellfish or fish or any certain food. And so it's been really exciting to watch this translation. As we're translating it to clinical OIT, we're continuing to do research to see how can we even better our OIT program? How can we make it so there's less potential side effects? How can we make people tolerate their desensitization better? And so Maria and I are really excited about, having these two parts of our program, constantly looking for new research, constantly looking for ways to improve management of food allergies, and at the same time being able to translate it into clinical OIT as well. So that's been really exciting over the past few years.
I feel so lucky that clinical oral immunotherapy is what my 9-year-old Will and I benefited from. And even though we're not cured, it's just so incredible to me that there was like no amount of peanut that was too small to cause a really serious reaction for my whole life. And after being in this program and getting this treatment, I can actually tolerate a few peanuts now. And that makes a tremendous difference, at restaurants and when I'm cooking, and cross-contamination and all of it. And to see Will already be benefiting from that feels like a miracle to me.
And to go back to the school, to what you were talking about, Kara, going back to these elementaries, to keep them safe in a school environment, it does offer another buffer, right? So we have this communication with the school administrators and teachers and families and other students, to try to decrease exposure or eliminate exposure at the school. But then this gives us another buffer to say, okay, well, in addition, if there's accidental exposure to a certain amount, they won't have as severe of a reaction. So it's a wonderful intervention to improve quality of life, to help parents and kids to feel safer in their environment.
Yeah, it's been life-changing in our family as well. Sleepaway camp became an option after oral immunotherapy. Having a teenager, I feel much better, knowing that when he's out in the world doing his independent thing, that he's got this layer of protection, and it helps him feel more confident. And there's a whole psychological aspect to it also. So I'm so glad that that work is happening, and we're so happy to support it in the parent committee. Okay. Dr. Butte, what exactly is the immune system? And you've talked a little bit about this already, but how can parents keep their kids' immune systems strong? Is there anything they can do to beef those up?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. This question was also raised in the Q&A just now. So I think it's on a lot of people's minds. The immune system evolved in our bodies to protect us from infection. First and foremost, we know that there's an evolutionary arms race between bacteria and viruses and parasites, and our body's ability to sort of prevent those things from causing harm in us. That evolutionary arms race is what produces and refines over eons our immune system. And so that's why we can get a cut and a bacterial infection and it can heal by itself, maybe without even antibiotics, or you can get a cold and clear it by yourself. We've evolved so many patterns over millions of years that recognize infection and fight. And so you may think that making IgE antibodies against, some nut that you picked off a tree evolutionarily doesn't make a lot of sense in that context. It's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's not attacking us. It seems like it's an accident. It seems like it's a mishap of evolution that we developed this immune response against a food because it's not actually a predator. It's not trying to kill me. And I think this is an important perspective to understand how the immune system works, and in a lot of cases, in cases of allergies, doesn't work. At least there's a good amount of evidence from recent studies to support the idea that food allergies may have developed as a protection mechanism from eating harmful foods. So foods that contain toxins or foods that contain non-nutritious things. Our gut already knows how to deal with some of those things. Like if you eat something that's really toxic, you may get cramping pain and have diarrhea and sort of get it out of your body, right, as fast as you can. And one branch of thinking is that food allergy accelerates that process. The ability to find toxic foods and get them out and produce mechanisms to sort of neutralize the toxins in foods might be a way to sort of protect us from toxin exposure. And so this isn't really a defense against an infection, but more like defense against a toxin that might have caused us harm. Now, of course, in the world that we're living in, this has gone awry, right? This is not actually helping us or our kids. This has gone awry. So why did this evolutionary mechanism that protected us from eating this bad, like some berry that's going to make you very sick, why did that go awry so that my kid can't eat, strawberries or peanut butter or whatever? I think that's where you have to sort of think about, again, that interaction between our immune system and the gut microbiome to try to understand these bacteria that live in our gut that normally help us process foods and think about whether it's a meal or whether it's a bad guy. That microbiome goes awry, and that pushes our whole immune system awry. Hygiene and the excessive amounts of hygiene we have, early antibiotic exposure, both during pregnancy and in early life. And again, I want to reiterate what Jessica said in the beginning. This is not about guilt. I'm not trying to make people feel like bad that they had to take antibiotics because they were sick, but more like just trying to explain what we're learning from the studies from mice, from humans, from mechanisms of the immune system. But it looks like antibiotic exposure does sort of push the immune system, the gut microbiome sometimes in bad directions. eating processed foods, especially ones with preservatives, rather than healthy foods that sort of keep a rich level of fresh microbiome and metabolites in our gut. And that includes, for example, fermented foods. Now, all of these things that we do now, eating, Oreos like my kids love to eat, all that stuff, what it does is it pushes your gut microbiome into states of being that aren't creating tolerance. And you can combine that with other external factors like air pollution and genetic things, like you might be born in a family that has a tendency to eczema and allergies. And then on top of that, sleep, and on top of that, other nutrition, and on top of that, all the things that we know also help the immune system retain a normal state, a healthy state. We can sometimes find that those things, when they add on top of each other, produces a state where the kids just don't have a chance. That the gut, that this food that they eat is now tricked into making a response to protect them from that food rather than to absorb that food as nutrition. So I'm trying to really answer your question by saying that the immune system itself is like a thing, a living thing within us. It needs its own healthy state of interaction with the gut microbiome. That includes all the foods and the ways we eat and things that I was talking about. But it's not really meant to harm us. It's meant to try to protect us in the end. It's just gone awry.
Well, what I wanted to add is that, like the brain, the immune system is teachable. And more importantly, we're learning that it's teachable and modifiable. And like the old, concept that you can't grow brain, after the age of 3, the immune system evolves. And we were going back to, how do you outgrow allergies? You can outgrow them most of the time in a window, but there is chances to outgrow them later. And you can pick up allergies later too. So the immune system, as Manish says, is a living thing that is modifiable pretty much until the day you say enough is enough. So in our children, it shows more apparently in the first few years of life, maybe after they finish elementary school. But this is an important concept for many parents or patients themselves that don't settle for, I have a peanut allergy, this is it. It's like I'm a redhead. No, you can change your destiny. This is, the immune system and your doctor will help you change your destiny in terms of food allergies.
Can I just add to that, so there's been a couple questions about ways to improve, enhance that immune tolerance. And especially for food allergies, we do find certain prebiotics and probiotics can help that microbiome be a little bit more tolerant. So things like adding lactobacilli-based probiotics into the diet, whether it's through food or through probiotics like Culturelle. And then prebiotics, there's been really good data about butyrate, which is an active ingredient in ghee or in clarified butter. So it's just the fat that actually is the medium chain fatty acids that actually can function as a prebiotic to induce tolerance. Increasing vitamin D in the diet can help induce tolerance. Certain vitamin B, like quercetin or coenzyme Q10, can help induce tolerance. So absolutely having a holistic approach in helping the immune system towards this state of tolerance. We already are using some of those methods in our patients who are doing oral immunotherapy, or even in patients who choose not to do oral immunotherapy, but want to embrace their immune system. And so already we are finding ways to improve that tolerance in the microbiome, and we're constantly studying that. So prebiotics, probiotics, vitamin D, vitamin B, things like that will help induce tolerance.
Thank you. Okay, we've got time for one quick question, one last one, and this is for Dr. Kachru. What can we do as parents to help our children start to become their own advocates?
encourage them that they have it. They control their own body, and they control what they put into their body, and nobody else can force them to do that. And I think it's really, really important to take the time, especially when they're around 5 or 6 years, even before then, even when they're 2 or 3 years old, to show them what they're allergic to actually maybe even eat it in front of them and say, this is safe for my body, this is not safe for your body, right? This is a, let's say, peanut. This is what a peanut looks like. These are all the different ways that you can see a peanut. This is what a peanut looks like when you write a peanut, the word peanut. Really educating your child, because as Maria mentioned, it's very important as parents to be advocates and really feel comfortable being advocates for the schools and for play dates and parties. But it's also important to make sure that the child also feels confident that I can do this. I can control my environment. I can say, no, that's not safe for me. Let me check. Let me look at the ingredient list. Let me check with the parent. Let me make sure that this doesn't include the food that I'm allergic to. So it's really encouraging the child that they actually have the confidence to control what they put into their diet or what they have exposure to.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think it's so important to let kids practice doing that too in a safe way, right? Like even if you're there with them to help them be safe, let them also read the label, right? And begin to recognize the allergen in the ingredient list, or let them tell the waiter or waitress, what they're allergic to, just so they can start to exercise those muscles. We're nearing the end of our hour together. So before we wrap up, I'd love to give each of our faculty leaders the opportunity to share any final remarks. Dr. Garcia-Lloret, would you like to go first?
I will go first. We are all aware, how much food allergies can affect the family's quality of life. And I have to remind everyone that you're not alone. It feels that sometimes. The challenges are in school, in activities. The challenges are not only what to avoid, but what to give them. How do we ensure the basic nutrition of the kid that has 25 food allergies? And we definitely have some patients that are truly allergic, especially young kids. Our program not only offers ways of navigating the school system, but also navigating the nutritional aspects of food allergies that are an ongoing worry. Ask your doctor, ask your allergist, ask your dietitian how to combine, the food allergies with the nutritional expectations. And this is one example, again, of how families should lean on your doctor, lean on your community. We've been through all this and we can help, because again, that sometimes it seems that everything is kind of dark, but we're here for you, and we understand how taxing this condition is on families with young children.
Thank you. Dr. Kachru, how about your closing thoughts?
I agree with you, Maria. It's very easy to feel very isolated when your child or yourself has a food allergy, but we have a big food allergy community, and feel free to reach out and advocate for the children, and also to empower the child to feel comfortable to advocate for themselves. This is a really key time in their life, between 5 and their teenage years, where it's this combination of parent advocacy and child advocacy. And it's that balance that really keeps them in a safe environment. And not just safety, but also not feeling isolated. I think this is also a key time for them to learn socialization skills and learn how to communicate with other people, with kids their own age, with adults. And so really this is an important time to feel comfortable. Again, as Maria said, ask your doctor, ask other parents, ask the food allergy parent committee here, who I know Jessica and Kara have been answering. Like we're connecting them constantly with parents who have questions, because they shouldn't feel isolated. We are learning a lot, and we'd love to share what we're learning so that everybody feels empowered to deal with the food allergies.
Thank you. Dr. Butte, let's end with you.
You always make me do all the technical and immunological stuff in these talks. And, I can't wait for the next one when we do adults, because I myself developed food allergy as an adult. And, so I'm very sympathetic. I really think if I had to focus on sort of last thoughts, I would think about the research and the treatments that we see coming. I just went onto the FAIR website a couple days ago and looked. There are 136 interventional clinical trials happening right now in food allergy, according to the FAIR website. That includes, I just made a little list here, epicutaneous treatment, vaccines, nanoparticles, immunizations, an allergen desensitization toothpaste, monoclonal antibodies against 5 different cytokines and cell surface molecules like cyclic A. I mean, it's an incredible panoply of treatments coming for food allergies. It is a very good time to be an immunologist. It's a very good time to think about being optimistic. There's hope and healing on the way for food allergy. One thing that we're trying to build at UCLA is the research capability to build new treatments of our own. We've highlighted here, and we will many times, some of the new treatments that are being developed here, the new understanding of microbiome, the new understandings in the areas of genetics, and of course in new treatments. We want to build a larger faculty base and research program in these areas, because I think that's the future for not just food allergy, but for a lot of immune-mediated diseases. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you all to our panelists, to everybody that joined us today for this webinar. And thank you for submitting your questions. If we did not get to your question, and I know there were a few in the chat that didn't get answered, please tune in to the remainder of our series. In January, we'll present the next installment, which will focus on the teen and early adulthood years. And finally, I'd just like to reiterate that it is not easy to manage food allergies, especially in the elementary school years, and especially when the research is always evolving. If you're a parent out there listening, you're doing an amazing job with your children. And I sincerely encourage you to connect with the food allergy community in ways that feel supportive to you. And we at UCLA are here for you. Our parent committee is very active and would love to connect. So if you're interested in learning more about UCLA's food allergy program and about our research, there are some links in the chat box. There should be some links. There you go.
And everyone who registered today will receive an email with a video link from today's event, along with a survey, which we encourage you all to complete. On behalf of the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee, please stay safe and thank you for attending.